everybody, and welcome to our July live chat. We're going to explore something today that is either going to be fun or it's going to irritate a whole bunch of people. And I will just try my best to keep it from doing that, because it really is an important topic. And that is, what the heck do we do about this whole thing of copying? It's a subject that not many people, or not many I should say, is not given enough attention to. As far as I can see, especially when I go onto YouTube and see what other folks are doing in the realm of teaching and presenting, painting, that sort of thing. So I think it's time we just hit it over the head, hit it head first. So just as a way of getting some housekeeping things out of the way, as we always do, and waiting for folks to come in, you may notice, if you're a subscriber but you're not a Studio Insider member, you can watch, but only the Studio Insider members can make comments or ask questions. And that's intentional, because we have so many subscribers that it can get really there's really a traffic jam of comments that come in if we have it open to all subscribers as well as members. So we keep it to the members. And if you subscribers are not a member, you want to join, you can join by wherever you are on the YouTube channel, or if you just clicked a YouTube a viewing button of some sort, you will see there in the menu at the bottom, I think it's at the bottom, in the menu you'll see the word join. You click on that. It's $4.99 a month, and the members get a free video lesson every month. That is really popular. People are really enjoying those free video lessons. And you get every second Sunday, you get a little short clip with a little video tip, usually something to do with the whole huge realm of composing paintings. Sometimes it's technique, but it's something like that. And then, of course, you are able to ask questions during the live chat we do every month. Every third Sunday when we can, we get an interference on the third Sunday, we do it on the fourth. So it's all well. And I see folks are beginning to come in now and say hello to us, and hello to all of you so far. Patricia from Ireland. No, Patricia. Yeah, Patricia, Ireland. Carolyn, Cheryl, Terry, and everybody else who's not hitting the comment section. Glad to see people gathering in. And so what we'll do is now go ahead and get started. And for the newcomers to this, the way we do this is I begin all the chats with a brief little video, about 10-12 minutes. This one's just under 12, I think. Explaining concepts about the topic to help you to kind of focus on the topic and get ideas. And if you happen to, those are the members, Studio Insider members, jot down questions you have on scrap paper or something, and then wait to the end of the video, and then you can ask the question, and we will have our little discussion as we always do. Here comes Mary Ellen and Sheila. Great. So, Roger, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's just go ahead and roll that video. Okay, folks, here we go, and I'll see you on the other side. One of our oldest methods of learning is copying. Copying is how we learn to form the letters of the alphabet. Copying is how we learn to use utensils when we eat. Copying is one of our major methods of learning new skills. But for every painter, there are areas where we never should copy. There are areas where we should be cautious when we copy. And there are areas where copying is an okay thing to do. Let's put some light on those areas. Let's find out where we painters should really pay attention to that whole issue of copying. There are 3 areas where the copying is a part of the painter's learning process. We're copying when we're taking paint-along classes and workshops. When we're studying paintings done by other artists, we're copying. And then there's copying photographs. So the act of copying is not the issue. The issue is what we do with those copies and why we copied in the first place. Let's take those 3 reasons painters copy and examine them one by one as to the copying itself and what we do with the copies. One of the most common ways of teaching painting are the paint-along workshops and classes and even videos. We all know Bob Ross. Bob Ross would set out saying, this is the painting we're going to do today. And many people would copy along with Bob, step by step, the painting that he was doing. And I don't remember ever seeing Bob Ross show a reference. Maybe he did from time to time. But it was the painting he was doing that he was teaching people how to copy. Now, a lot of people innocently signed those paintings with their names. And there's where the rubber hits the road. They did the painting, but the painting was not theirs. The painting was Bob Ross. The idea is Bob Ross's. The technique is Bob Ross. The execution and composition is Bob Ross. The whole thing is Bob Ross painting. Now, to be honest, the person who did the painting or did the copy of Bob Ross could sign their name, but they should also write underneath it from Bob Ross or with Bob Ross in that case. Of course, Bob Ross is the extreme of paint-along, but there are a lot of paint-along workshops. It doesn't matter who the teacher is or what the workshop is. Any paint-along results or painting should be credited. Never try to claim something that was not yours to begin with. But what you can claim are the things you learned from doing the paint-along. The techniques that you might have learned, if there were any compositional principles you might have learned, ways of mixing paint, etc. That you can claim, that you can use, and it's okay to copy. Not only to copy techniques and composition, but to expand them into your own language, into your own way of using them. Painting, like every other skill, has certain techniques, certain ways of doing the painting itself that are universal, the way things work. And those things are available to all of us. We can all take those, and when we use them in our own way and through our own voices, then they belong to us. Then the painting belongs to us, but not when the painting is being done by somebody else. But what about when we study a painting done by another artist, where we are not following a paint-along, but we're simply copying another artist's painting? Well, that too is tricky. There's where we have to be cautious. The important thing is that whenever we're using another artist's work to learn, remember the whole purpose for copying as an artist is to learn. When you use it to learn, then you take what you learn and use it on your own and even evolve it on your own, then you can claim it. You can sign the work, of course, no problem. But copying, whether it's copying from another artist or whether it's copying with another artist, that kind of copying we have to be cautious about. And this is a good place to bring up a nasty word, plagiarism. Plagiarism means when we're trying to pass somebody else's work off as our own. There's a difference between taking someone else's technique or practicing how someone else has composed something
and then using that method to apply to our own idea. That is not plagiarism. That is simply applying something that's universal. Austin Kleon calls it still like an artist. I like Austin's definition of copying to learn. He says that copying is reverse engineering, taking something apart and putting it back together to see how it's made. Now that is what we all do when we learn by copying. Something else I like that he says, and that is we are copying from our favorite artist to learn to see the way the artist sees. And he adds to that, you want to see like your hero, not look like your hero. Probably the stickiest kind of copying is when we copy photographs taken by somebody else. That can really get sticky, and sometimes that can end up in court. In 2022, a case was heard by the Supreme Court. It was about Andy Warhol having created a series of 16 artworks based on a 1981 photo of Prince taken by the photographer Lynn Goldsmith. A lower court had determined this was fair use, but the Supreme Court ruled that it was copyright infringement. There is a law in our country that protects artists or anybody who creates images. Once you create an image, it belongs to you. You have automatic copyright for that image. If you make that image a free use image, such as those we find on pixabay.com or on pexels.com and other places on the internet where we have copyright-free images, then that image is available for anybody to use it anytime and any way they want to. But for the artist, for the painter, it becomes sticky when we copy that image verbatim, no matter who took the photograph. We forget sometimes that a photograph is that photographer's composition, that photographer's viewpoint. If we copy that composition, that viewpoint, and claim it as our own, we are actually infringing on that person's copyright. Not only that, but we're really being dishonest. However, if you copy directly from a photograph that is not copyrighted, you still need to give credit for it. Put the photographer's name underneath yours. Just say from and the photographer's name. Writing that underneath your name tells the viewer you did the painting, but you took it from the composition of this photographer. It's just the honest way to do it. We all need images in order to learn to paint. Whether those images come from photographs or whether we are looking at the image such as a still life or a portrait, or whether we're in plein air painting. We need the images in order to learn to paint. We just need to be careful and aware of where the image originated and what we do with it or how we present it without claiming full credit if we didn't create the image itself. Now there's one other point I want to make, and that is about the images that we use for learning. If what you do is within a classroom environment, or if you're taking a course online, or any kind of method of learning, then that really should not be exhibited as a professional work. It should not be presented as a professional work because you had help and guidance while you were doing it. What I suggest, and what a lot of professional artists and teachers suggest, is that you think of your work, the work you produce as a painter, in two categories. One category was, is this the result of learning, of a learning environment, or is this the result of your working environment, where you're actually working to create a painting without the guidance of somebody else? So you see, the issue is not copying itself. When we're using copying as a method of learning, that's totally different from when we're copying to claim something that someone else has originated or someone else has done. Let's stop now and give you a chance to ask your questions.
Okay, folks, I'm ready for the questions now. Did I stimulate any questions there, or did I point out anything that you weren't aware of, or did it give you second thought about anything, or did you already know all this stuff? Oh, look, there comes a heart. Woohoo! That must have been, that's a good sign. I don't mind hearts at all. So, there are several things that are kind of sidelines that I did not mention in the video. For one, I'll just bring up now, and that is that in the copyright protection, whether anything is open source or, well, let me say this a different way. Parody is one exception to the copyright infringement, and I have to be careful how I say that. But we see lots of parodies. Mona Lisa, for one, you see how many different versions, how many different things do you see Mona Lisa doing, especially on Facebook and on some of the YouTube videos. And then we were talking about that earlier, that Mona Lisa is heavily parodied, as is American Gothic, the old farmer and his wife. How many versions of that have you seen? And then the girl with the pearl earring is another one that has gotten lots of, lots of press, lots of attention. Folks love to do parodies of those sorts of things. And then we know that there is the parody that happens in writing as well. And sometimes even in music you will hear parodies. And then the other thing I wanted to add to that is that I think it might, if you haven't read the little book, How to Steal Like an Artist, I think it might be something you can get if you have you can get a Kindle version of it, or you can get a paperback version of it. It really is a very straightforward and entertaining little book, and it really is practical. It really is practical about the whole issue of how artists share, or how artists build on works of other artists with more universal ideas, techniques, and so on, or versus just plain ripping it off from other artists. Okay, Terry asked, I teach an oil painting class and I always tell my students, this is your painting. I may give you suggestions or possible options, but do they need to give credit to the class? Well, now here, this is where it gets a little fuzzy, Terry. If they produce paintings in the class with your guidance, I think one way to distinguish this is, even though they're doing it, how much guidance are they receiving from you? If it's in the realm of receiving guidance, and that work should go in their learning category, should not be exhibited as a professional piece. And a lot of competitions, especially the big national competitions, will not accept work that was done in a class or in a workshop situation. So there is a distinct difference between producing a work with the guidance of somebody and producing the work where you're not working under someone's guidance, but where you're making all the decisions by yourself. And that's the reason I suggest there at the end that everybody think of their work, whether paintings or drawings, it doesn't matter, whether to think of it as in those two categories. Was I in a learning situation when I did this, where I received advice or help or guidance from somebody else, or was I in my studio where I was making all the decisions myself? And I think we should distinguish that too also between, well, a lot of times even professional painters, sometimes we get feedback from other artists. If we're in the middle of a painting or something, a little feedback from another artist, that's a totally different thing. And I know how that could get to be a slippery slope at times. But it's simply a matter of whether you're in a learning environment or not. So yes, it is their painting, and I think that no, they don't need to give credit to the class. The credit part that I was talking about is not for the class, but is for images that are used. If the image is used, if the image for the painting, the photograph, if it's a photograph or whatever, is used for the piece itself, then the credit needs to be given to the photographer, especially if the composition of that image was pretty close to the composition of the photographers. So, and that too, and remember I said there's some of these that are in kind of a sticky or slippery slope. Sometimes you might just get ideas, or sometimes you might see an image, like you might be looking for a particular kind of image, maybe an owl sitting in a tree or something, and you've got your own composition, but you don't have the owl. Well, that's different. It's different. You can go through, especially in Pixabay, whatever. So there are times when we can take bits and pieces of images. So it's the whole, I think it comes down to, if you took the framing of the piece from the photographer, the photographer's point of view, viewpoint, then you need to give credit to that photographer, because it was that photographer that created that composition, not so you see that little bit of a difference there. But I hope that answers that. Cheryl asks, when copying a master's painting such as Rembrandt, which are in the public domain to initially learn, then later someone wants to purchase the painting, should one just say no on the sale? Not necessarily, Cheryl, but it's important, very important, if you do a copy of a master painting, to acknowledge it. Acknowledge it on the painting. Now, some people don't want to mar the surface of their painting by saying from Rembrandt or whatever. But I advocate doing that. I advocate sign the piece, but underneath it, just the way I described in the video, underneath your signature, say from Rembrandt. That's really all you need to say. If you want to be more specific, you could. If you want to say from a portrait of artist by Rembrandt or whatever. But just from Rembrandt tells the viewer that this is my copy or my study from Rembrandt, and that then acknowledges that this is not original with you. And that is important. It's just a part of, it's just being clean with how we get our images and how other people respond. Remember, we don't have any control over who's going to see our work. Especially when we sell it, when it leaves our hands, we don't have any control over who sees it. And so we want to be sure that we don't claim something that we didn't, some image that we didn't originate or in some way form that composition, especially ourselves. So I hope, and it's okay to sell a study from another artist, as long as you give credit, as long as underneath your signature you say from and the artist's name, you're good. Then that's perfectly fine to do. So other questions, I'll just wait for other questions before I call for them, because I'm sure you probably have some. There's another issue too. Wait a minute, here comes one. Okay, she says fine. The other thing that might be confusing for you is that you do go to, especially you go to workshops where at the end of the workshop, at the end of the workshop, there's a required show. In other words, you've got to exhibit the work that you did in the workshop. Those workshops vary as to what kind of workshop it is. Sometimes it's a plein air workshop where you're really not getting instruction. It's just a way of gathering people together to let them go out in the field and paint and then make that work available. Now you can see that's not an issue as far as copying goes. The copying comes in when there is an image that was created by somebody else. And that's all we're talking about. And as far as the painting itself, what I said there towards the end about categorizing your work, being professional about your work, when you have received, and I said this, I'm not, this is broken record, it's going to sound like a broken record, but if you did this under the guidance of somebody, where that person was guiding you about making decisions, or in some cases showing you how to make decisions, then that's learning, and that's in the lessons category. There's a distinct difference between that kind of work and having done it on your own, making all the decisions yourself based on where you are now as an artist. So, but that's kind of a sideline of the whole issue of copying, but it's necessary, I think, too. So that was one of the points I wanted to make there while I was making that, and it kind of skipped my mind. Maybe it'll come back in a minute. The issue of what happens in the classroom, we all know that varies depending on who the instructor is and what the instructor's approach to teaching is. So if the instructor is having you to copy verbatim along with them, like the Bob Ross method is, you see how that is a much more serious issue, because everybody's painting is going to look pretty much alike to begin with, because they're all copies of that person's painting. So I said it's fine to sign, it's fine to say I did it, but say from or with. In that case, I prefer saying with whoever the teacher is, because that acknowledges that you were painting along with. And that's the distinction. The paint along workshops are handled like I just described to you, but other workshops or other classes are handled differently, where you're not copying what the teacher is doing, you're working on your own, and you're working under the guidance of the teacher. So Cheryl says, I assume it doesn't really matter how much you change the reference photo, just thinking about the one-wall copy. Yeah, he changed a bit, but it didn't look exactly like the photo. I think the real issue there, Cheryl, was not it didn't look like the photo, it was the same composition as the photo. If you'll notice, I think I have that right, but I may not. But if you'll notice, especially if you go to some of the websites where all 16 of the images are shown together, they're all the same composition, exact composition of the photo itself. And I think the composing of it is what the issue is. The composing of it is what's important. So remember the composing of it, when a photographer has a camera, that photographer is moving that camera around in various positions to get a particular composition, interpretation that feels good to that photographer, that seems the best to that photographer. And if you copied that, if you copied that composition, the way things are arranged in there, then you have copied the composition. And remember, the composing is really the heartbeat of the painting. How the thing is put together is equally important with the images themselves. So I think that is what the issue really is. Patricia says, what about using several photos of the same mountain to do my own sketch, which is not copy of any one photo? Use of photos, pure geography. Yeah, oh, now see, there we go. That's different. That way you're taking images and composing them yourself. And so you're not infringing so much as you are getting information. And you see how slick and tricky that can get when there's a difference between research and combining images together from several sources. That's sort of like doing a thesis research in writing, where you're taking information from several sources, but you're giving credit to those sources. But if you're just taking single images there without taking the composition, unless there's something unique about that image that is going to identify it as that photographer's work. That's different. But I think it just requires sound judgment as to the difference between a direct copy and taking bits and pieces or getting ideas and that sort of thing. So I think you can figure that out. Just remember the composition is the main thing as far as the photograph is concerned. If you're using someone else's photograph, it's how it's composed that is the main thing. Carolyn, did I answer that? Patricia, let me know. Carolyn says it used to be if you changed a line of music of the same color composition, that would make the work yours. Yeah. And see, there again, it gets it can get fuzzy. There are a lot of gray areas when it comes to this whole topic. And I think and the copyright laws have changed a lot over the years. There has been a limp attempt to evolve the copyright laws according to how things have expanded in the area of visual art and music and literature. So it's sort of like when a basketball player studies the moves of another basketball player and tries to imitate those moves to make it work, but then adapts it to his or her own a physical way of moving, then is that stolen from the person it's taken from? And so that can be a gray area. No, maybe that the general opinion is that it's an adapted thing. It's taking a particular technique and adapting it to your own. And so then in music, you're right that there was at one time, if there's enough changed about it, as far as the lines go, and where it's not obviously a lift, it's acceptable. You see, I want you to be, you have to distinguish for yourself, all of us do, where those gray areas are, and where our attitude is, I think, what mainly matters. What is our intention? And so let's see, what else have we got now? Cheryl said it makes sense about the composition. I like what you said, the composition is the heartbeat of the photograph. Yeah. Thank you, Dianne. The clarify is good. Glad to see that clarified. Reached a discussion about Warhol, created some discussion. Not everyone agreed. That's true, not everyone agreed. And Roger and I were talking about this earlier. We all know about the Supreme Court too, that the decisions that are made in the Supreme Court might be totally opposite depending on who's on the court. That one set of justices might determine something, and then maybe a few years later, that whole composition of justices has changed, and they take the same subject and revisit it and change it. We've seen that happen recently. So it could be that, future justices of whatever would not agree with the Supreme Court's decision. So I'm not saying the Supreme Court was right or wrong. I'm just saying let's be aware that this can happen. And that's all. The reason I showed you that and brought that up is I want you to be aware, especially if you use a copyrighted photograph, if you copy a copyrighted photograph, or if you use it in a painting, enough of where there's enough similarity that it can be identified as having been having evolved from that painting or come from that painting, then you could be sued. Now, it's especially true. Let me call your attention to something. One thing that I've seen happen over and over again is people taking images from magazines, from newspapers, taking photographs from newspapers and magazines and copying those. Now those things you might say are double copyrighted. The artist if are the photographers, usually photographers in a magazine or newspaper. The photographer has the automatic copyright. The publication itself has a copyright to that publication, and so either one of them, chances are happening very slim, of course, but I wouldn't want it to happen to me because you get the pantsuit off for something like that. So that's just another element of it, just another part of it. And I don't remember even what it was I was addressing when I brought that up. All about the composite. Yeah, about the Warhol thing. That's where we started. That's what started that little stream of thought, wasn't it? Yeah. So I think be reasonable, be aware. That's the main thing I wanted to do with this chat with you today, was just to create some awareness of where we get our images and the purpose they serve in our work. And not to be dogmatic about it, and not to point fingers or anything like that, but just also consider what your purpose is, and what you do with the work. Now let's see. Carolyn says, I wrote once to a calendar asking to copy pictures. They sent me permission, but that may not apply for top. Yes. Now you can get permission. You can, and it's better. It's always better if you use the image. If you use the image of a photographer, especially a copyrighted piece, it's always better to get permission. It's just cleaner to get permission to use it. But the professional approach to that, if you're using that composition, the professional approach is not only to get permission, but to give credit. Now, a lot of times I will use paintings when I'm teaching in workshops, especially. I will use paintings as an example, and I'll take them through some kind of an analysis. I always get permission from the painter before I do that. I always send an email and ask permission, and I've never been turned down. I've always been granted permission. At the same time, without exception, they ask me to give credit, and I always do. And so if you can think about for yourself that if someone copied your work, what would be your reaction to that? Now, I know I've heard this, I'd be complimented. Oh yeah, well, I tell you what, when I've seen my work copied, I didn't feel complimented, I felt resentful. I probably shouldn't bring that up, but there is another thing too, is when a person is intentionally copying somebody else's painting, and then signs it without giving credit. Now, can all of you see just kind of how that nasty that is? So you can see that, and I've talked with many over the years, many professional painters who have had this happen. I've had it happen. And I think almost all painters whose work has been exposed to the general community has had that sort of thing happen. Somebody see your painting, and especially if you do a video of that painting, somebody might copy it verbatim, and sign it, and not give you credit. Well, that's really dishonest. And even though it could be taken to court, I don't think that's not even the point. The point is, let's do our own work. Let's get our own images. And if we work from somebody else's image, let's give them credit, or somebody else's composition. Patricia asked about international copyright. I'm not real cognizant about international copyright. I know that some countries are parallel with ours on the automatic copyright. But I think copyright probably varies, and I'm not really up on an international attitude about copyright. So probably check that out. Yeah, probably check that out. See what you can find out. Do some research online about that, Patricia. Just don't know the answer to it. Okay, let's see. So it seems like there was something. Oh yes, there's one other part I wanted to bring up with you about the whole issue of copy of the copy thing, and this is not really about copying, but it's akin, and that is, now I'm a little bit hesitant to bring this up, but I want just to create some awareness here. When you are in a class and you are doing a painting and you can't figure out how to do some area of the painting, and you call your teacher over, if your teacher does that area for you, then is it still yours? Is the piece still yours? Is the piece still 100% yours? Or now does it belong to you and your teacher? Now, I know some of you who are watching this are teachers too, but that's an issue that I think is something we need to consider. From my viewpoint, whatever is done in class ought to be recognized as class work, as the class category, and it needs to be indicated. You need to. I think it would be wise of us, I should say it like this, to make that distinction. If I did it in class, if I'm learning, if I needed someone else to do an area for me because I didn't know what to do, then that's a learning experience. That's not to be exhibited as professional work and presented as yours, that you did it totally by yourself, or that is your total idea or your total execution, that it's your skills that made everything on there happen. You see what I'm trying to explain to you there, that I think take that in consideration. And I don't know, I might suggest that teachers find another way to do that without painting on a student's work. But I'm going to pull back on that one because I don't want to. I don't have to deal with it. But my personal attitude is I'd rather find another way to show that student whatever technique it is that needs to happen. And I think we're safer to do that. And one other thing I wanted to mention about, and that is, I've heard this attitude too, about when a person copies a work, and that is, well, it won't make any difference. I don't plan to sell it. I'm just going to give it to my daughter or my friend or whatever. Okay. You don't have any control over what happens to that piece once it leaves your hands. You can give it to a family member, you can give it to a friend, or you can simply put it in your closet. You won't always be on this earth. Somebody's going to take possession of it sooner or later, or it's going to end up in the trash bin. That's just going to happen. It's always better to be safe. Always better. Let's just do what we should do. Either don't sign it if it's a copy or a studio a piece of learning, a category of learning. Either don't sign it. If you don't sign it, even to say where it's from, just say from Rembrandt, from whoever, that sort of thing. That's just being clean, and it is sort of. Someone, say 200 years from now, shows up at Antiques Roadshow with a painting. It's unsigned, and they say, I think I've got a genuine Rembrandt here. And then the Antiques Roadshow personnel or evaluator, I forgot what the correct term is, will say, yeah, that is a copy from, pardon me, that's a copy from Rembrandt someone did in 2023. That's going to happen like maybe in 2082 or maybe on into the what would it be now, 22nd century, 21st century, 22nd century, yeah. Well, anyway, you see where I'm going. I'm not trying to be silly here, but just because you don't have any intention of being a professional artist, that doesn't excuse it. That doesn't excuse it. If you do it and you leave the evidence behind, then it's a good idea, let's just say, for future generations or whoever might see this, this is where it came from. that is, if it is a copy, either from someone else's photograph or from another artist. Okay, Cheryl, I decided a while back after unknowingly, as far as copyright laws, copied a photograph without reference to only use my own photographic reference. Oh, I see what you're saying there, Cheryl. There's things that interfere with my being able to. There we go. Here we go. A good policy, as I add my own feelings. That yes, indeed. And Cheryl, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is the better way to go. To use your own references. We've all got phones now. Of course, the ideal way to work, and most painters will make this point, is from life, but we can't always do that. You know, going out and painting in nature, or setting a still life, or doing live painting from someone who's sitting. I don't like the word figure painting at all. I like, you paint humans, you don't paint figures. I won't go there. But anyway, but it's not always possible, and a lot of professional artists do studies in plein air, but they do their real production in the studio. You have more time in the studio, you have more control, you've got the light control, you got the bug control. Well, most people do. So yes, building your own arsenal of reference photos is the best way to go. Have your own references there. And then that is because when you point that camera, that's your point of view, and then you're clean. You don't have anything to sweat, because when you sign it, it's yours, your image from the very beginning. So yes, that's always my preference, doing it that way. Rich, I have a dozen or so Robertson Mize compositions. Oh yes, you do, don't you, Rich? Maybe we won't go there. Okay, good policy as I add my feelings to it. Yes, yeah, we're excellent idea. Every time I start one of these explanations, there's an idea that pops up back here. You need to say that too, and usually by the end of my explanation, I've forgotten the idea. Terry, so maybe those will come up eventually. Terry says, thanks for the information. I'll share it with students. Yes, I've never painted on the canvas of any student. Bless you, Terry. Even though I've been asked to, gotten some huffy responses. Yeah, there are other ways to do it. That's a tough one, I know, because that reminds me of what I was about to say. Thank you, Terry, because that triggered something. That if we think about how we learn as painters and how musicians learn, our disadvantage, if we can call it a disadvantage, in a way it is, our handicap, better way to say it, our handicap is that we have our evidence left behind. We cannot practice painting without doing painting, and we cannot do painting without creating something, with having the evidence left behind. A musician can practice without unless they record it, they don't have the evidence left behind. They can continue to practice scales or whatever they're doing to work out the technical issues or expressive issues on their instrument, and the evidence is not left behind. So the musician doesn't really have the problem. We really have a problem, because when we make something and we've created a painting, the tendency is to show it. That's fine. Show it, share it, whatever. But that is a little bit of a handicap, because that then makes it a little bit fuzzier in our heads and in our collection of work. It makes it a little bit fuzzier what goes in the learning category and what goes in the working category. When I say working category, now remember what I mean. I mean, you didn't need guidance. You weren't using someone else's guidance, but you were producing with your own decision making and so on, like that. And so that we can just acknowledge that. I think a good policy there is what I say is don't do your rehearsing on stage. I don't know any musician that goes out in front of an audience to rehearse or to practice. Every musician wants to do their practicing rather sort of in private, but certainly not with an audience, not necessarily, unless they're a real funky musician. But anyway, but painters don't have that privilege of not being able to have not leave the evidence, etc. So that's why it's really easy to create your work, keep your work in that category. What's my learning category? What area of my studio am I keeping my pieces that I use for learning? And what area of my studio am I keeping the pieces for as production? That's my work, my evolving as the artist, that where I use whatever skills and concepts I understand now, I use those to put together that painting, respond to that painting without guidance from someone else. And I think that's a pretty good way to distinguish between the two on that issue, on that particular issue. Cheryl says, I think it's not the composition when I said feelings. I think it's not only the composition when I said feelings. I know what I was feeling in the mood of the scene, then took the photo, so then I aimed to convey the feeling into the painting. Very good point. Very good point. Yes, and isn't it interesting how that happens, that when we do have a special response to a scene and we take a picture of it, that we will feel that again while we're painting. It's kind of a revisiting, it's an experience that we're sort of revisiting. And it's not to say that maybe seeing a photo someone else has taken might not also stimulate some sort of response that you associate maybe with experience of some sort, but it's yours. It was your point of view in that particular situation, in that particular time, etc., etc. So, all right, folks, we're getting towards the end. I want to, at this point, before we wrap it up, I just want to say that, and this is one of those time things where when anybody that watches this after July the 31st, it's not relevant at all, but because we are live now in July.
2023.
2023. Thank you, Roger. That's right. Because somebody might be watching this in 2038, right? Or 2062. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen then. But anyway, now, here's what's going on now. We have a special offer for our midsummer offer for you at DianneMize.com, where we sell our lessons. Now, these are the little individual lessons within a topic series, a series that is involved around a topic. So we're doing a buy one, get one free. These are downloads. You buy them and you download them onto your computer or your whatever, so that you always have access to them. So that's running through July the 31st for any of you who haven't already discovered that. There's a code, there's a coupon code there on the front page of the website. So all you have to do is to put everything you want, you buy as many as you want, put them in your cart, and then at checkout you use that coupon code, and that will knock off 50%. In fact, it's buy one, get one free. So I just wanted to let you know about that. And let's see, Terry says it's fairly delicate balance between offering value of instruction and actually telling people what they might do. That's true. That's true. Teaching is a tricky business too, isn't it, Terry? So, okay. Is there any other question? If you have any other question, let's call for questions, because it's getting just about time to wrap this thing up. And if I keep talking at this point, you know what? I might be shooting you some bull, and you don't want that. let's see, the buy one, get one is not just for the Academy workshops, but it's not the Academy at all. Thank you, Cheryl. No, the buy one, get one is not at all in the Academy. It is just for the lessons on the lesson site. We have those two sites. I know it's confusing, but we haven't figured another way to do it. The one site that has individual lessons, that's DianneMize.com. DIANNE, two N's. Dianne Mize, MIZE.com. That one is the one where we sell the lessons, the downloads. The other one is the Dianne Mize Academy. That's where you take courses. Those are full-length courses. Totally different way of learning, but still a fun way of learning. Both of them are. But the sale is not on the Academy right now. It's just on the lesson site. Eve says, thank you so much. Good to know this. So similar to what I've learned and worked with my photography. Good. Great. Okay. You're welcome. All of you. Teaching is tricky, but you do it so well. Thank you, Patricia. I've been doing it long enough. If I can't do it well, I'll stop. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I think that we pretty much have aired this one out.
I did have one comment. Made me think about it when you were talking about music. The lawsuit against the British pop artist Ed Sheeran.
Mm-hmm.
He was Marvin Gaye's estate or something, sued him, saying that he stole the chord progression.
Stole the chord progression.
Yeah.
I hope y'all heard that. So who won the suit?
Ed Sheeran did. He said that the chord progression was been used way before Let's Get It On ever came out.
That's a good point. Yeah, because
so there's historical
evidence. Yeah, and that's true, in painting too. And that's what I meant when I said that certain things are universal, like certain ways of composing color, certain ways of composing shapes, or certain ways of creating visual paths. And so there's certain, and the way we move the brush, has been going on like that for centuries. And whether, regardless of whether it's oil or watercolor, because acrylic is a relatively new medium. So yes, that's a good thing. There's so many parallels between music and painting that I don't think there's any end to it. Okay, Cheryl says, great. I thought it was Academy workshops. I'll go fill up my cart. No, not Academy workshops. Just lessons. Just lessons on the cart. Go fill up your cart, Cheryl. It's a good deal. We won't run one like that again for. I won't say, we may never run one like that again, or we might. You never can tell. But now it's always what counts, isn't it? Okay, folks. Thanks to all of you for staying with me, and you asked some good questions. And just go out there and enjoy painting, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? All right. That's it. So bye-bye for now.